Ajay Bharatwaj AH, making a presentation on how to conduct a data protection impact assessment (DPIA) for BCCA CDPU program. So let's start with our presentation. So what is DPIA and why it matters? So DPIA is basically a prediction rather than a reaction. It is legally complacent with Article 35 of GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations of the United Kingdom and of course the European Union, and is mandatory for high risk processing and for analyzing whether it's high risks data has to be compromised, whether it's high risk indeed. So it has to be identified. The risk identification is one of the biggest parts of DPIA. For example, phone numbers, the names, the last names, and even you take the example of home addresses, because these are all very sensitive. Even YouTube censors content with these kind of sensitive contents in it. So what it creates, the DPIA creates an era of accountability and transparency, because in a system of accountability and transparency, it's easy to create privacy-based design. So when there is a privacy-based design, the trust is given to documentation rather than zero documentation. So we're not trusting from scratch, but rather the system is created on trust. Now, we have 5 stages of DPIA. The first one would be the identification of an activity. So we have to identify which activity that we are processing. If we are processing a network, we are analyzing, let's say, a system, or we are analyzing a front end, or we are analyzing a financial system, whatever it is, we have to analyze the process that's involved. And once the process is analyzed, we have to see the necessity of whether it has to be um, analyzed or not, because we have to save cost even in this requirement. Rather than analyzing something which is of low risk, rather than analyzing of something which has no significance to the business, we have to analyze that has a requirement and that has a proportional outcome to the business, and to evaluate the risks of the data subject. So, for example, as we discussed earlier, we have to see whether the data that we are analyzing is high risk or low risk, or wherever that we have acquainted it with. And we also have to see the mitigations and the controls. When we see the mitigation, the mitigation is nothing but a recovery plan or an attack plan, or we have to see a game plan that's required. And in that, we have to see the controls. That's the limitation, the statutory limitations that we enforce. That's required to streamline the process. And of course, the recording of the decisions and reviewing it regularly is at most important, because documentation is evidencing. Now, we'll see the first and second step together. First step is identification, and the second step is justification of what the process is. So, the first step is we have to see whether the data is personal, or as we said, the sensitive data. And we have to say who can access it, who has the access, because access management has utmost importance in all cases. And whether it's needed, the access is needed, or the data itself, the source data itself is needed or not. Because if the process does not require a data, the data is not needed and it should be avoided at all cost. And also the same outcome will be achieved with less data. Absolutely. The data is not required, don't ask for it. So I'll give you an example. When I was working in a supermarket giant in the UK, we used to get loyalty cards from customers, and we used to have the name, their phone number, their birthdays, and all those kind of sensitive data. Whatever they are buying is recorded if they have a loyalty card, because it gives them loyalty points. And whatever they do not want, that will also be recorded in some cases, because we don't want them to receive our promotional mails that are not required. These are sensitive data, and this should be destroyed when there is end of the retention policy, when there is an end in retention, as we accept it in the policy itself with the customers. Now, the risk evaluation. This is step 3, risk evaluations. For example, I'll give you one example that I've seen in person itself. One of that will be shared till logins. See, you cannot log in with the supervisors in tills, because supervisors have certain extra privileges that the other employees would not have. The supervisors sometimes might have privileges like taking the cash. Supervisors sometimes might have the privileges of sending the orders to the vendors. These kind of things the subordinates do not have, because the idea is the trust only ascends. Trust cannot descend. So trust ascends according to the hierarchy. In that way, use zero trust principle, which we will see further. So to avoid shared tills, unique identification and MFA is extremely important. Of course, we'll see the vendor network access and excessive data retention. These are all part of the daily operations. Now, the mitigation planning. So, as we told, we have to design controls according to that compliance of GDPR, and we have to create a least privilege principle and identity access management, because this has utmost importance, because least privileges, as I said, trust only ascends according to the hierarchy. And we are also have to apply MFA and encryption, because MFA and encryption are basics of identity and access managements, because these days everyone has a mobile phone. In most cases they have a mobile phone, so give them a unique code every time they log in, and give them encryption for all their data. And we also have to have the access and the awareness records. Access has to be logged, there has to be a register, and also there has to be an awareness records or trainings, whether it has been given to them, and all those things. And we also have to have include vendors, because this is at most importance, because most of the time vendors are not included, but most of the time vendors data is what we use for us. And so we have to have privacy related awareness in our daily operation, because privacy is utmost importance when it comes to DPIA. And we'll see in further in step 5 why recording is the most important um, when we are reviewing. And recording is nothing but evidencing. Evidencing creates a credibility. And when you maintain a DPIA register, which is also in line with the ISO 27701, it creates a chance to review if there is any incidents or a change management. For example, if let's say a developer makes a mistake and the tester finds it, the developer cannot say the tester planted it. Instead, the developer has to be accountable for whatever he did based on the change management records. And similarly, a tester cannot blame it on the developers if he didn't find a bug. So that's where you cannot assume someone made a change. A change has to be verified, and that's where the records and evidencing play an utmost important role. Now, common mistakes is we use DPIA as a one-off process. It's not. It's a perennial process. We also ignore the third-party risks, because, as I said, we use third-party data and third-party operations. We have to include them and their risks in our assessments. And also, we cannot use one size fits all. We can't use an industry template. We can't use a template from the competitors. We can't use templates from others. Rather, we have to use it by ourselves and create oneself according to the needs of the company. Also, we have to make a follow-up. Follow-ups are the utmost basic of any change management and analysis, because if you don't follow up the mitigation process, there's no point of mitigating or auditing it. So we have to create a system where DPIA is perennial and continuous. Now, DPIA and zero trust. So zero trust is basically we have to create a policy to proof. DPIA identifies the risks, whereas the zero trust enforces the control. Both demand verification over trust, because verification, as we said, is more important than trust. That's the basics of evidencing. And IAM is basically identity access management and segmentation. These both are utmost important when it comes to dissecting a company and segregation of duties. Because without segregation of duties, it can be free for all an open season, and most of the cases it doesn't end well. And this is where evidence-based data protection plays an important role in creating an austere data protection. Now, as we said, to summarize this, we'll end it with know your data flow, that is to analyze how your data goes, the audit trail, the change management records, and all those things. Prove your controls. We have to prove that our controls are effective, but if they are not effective, they have to be read it in a way that it suits the business. And of course, reviewing is important before we regret any mistake, because mistakes are never welcome. Reviewing protects. Prevention is better than cure. Thank you for listening me, and I thank BCAA for providing this opportunity. I also thank my training group ISSS, Mr. Subramaniam and team, for providing me with amazing training. Thank you.